Hey everyone, welcome to Existential Side Quest. It's me, Jenna,
I'm Kimber.
and we're really excited to be here for our third episode, all about archetypes and outliers. The title of our episode being Archetypes Don't Break Outliers, They Just Complicate Them. So we're going to lean into that conversation today and really suss out what is the meaning of archetype, how these archetypes present themselves, what are they useful for, and how can astrologers incorporate them into our readings to bring even more meaning to our clients.
Yes. So if we have any outliers in the chat, please let us know so we can say hi. Okay. So do we want to first start with a definition of like what an archetype is?
Yeah, good idea.
So archetype is actually Greek for original pattern. I'm just going to read off the screen this definition. An archetype is a universally understood symbol or term or pattern of behavior, a prototype upon which others are copied, patterned, or emulated. Archetypes are often used in myths and storytelling across different cultures. And so we're talking specifically about the archetypes we use in astrology, right, Jenna?
The archetypes of the zodiac signs, the 12 zodiac signs. And the reason it's important to consider the fact that there are many different archetypes, even for one zodiac sign, is the fact that we're already taking the entire world and reducing it down to 12 categories with the zodiac signs. So those categories are going to be pretty big.
Yeah.
One Libra is not going to be the same as another Libra.
So you kind of already hit on it, but what would be an outlier to the archetype? Like, why would someone say, well, I'm an outlier?
Well, if someone hears the general archetypes or has like, we give, oh, well, these 5 words or how are adjectives for how that zodiac shows up. And someone says, well, I don't really identify with any of those. That's probably a hint that you're an outlier, because an outlier is something or someone that lives or is located outside of those edges of that given area, given frequency, whatever that zone is that we're defining.
Right. And I feel like sometimes people use I'm an outlier or, well, this person doesn't fit this as a reason why astrology isn't real or to try and debunk astrology, right?
Yeah, but it's actually kind of funny because pointing out that you're an outlier only reinforces that those archetypes are actually real.
Right. An archetype means like pattern,
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily speak to the expression.
Mhm.
Okay, so how about we think about why outliers exist and why someone might be showing up as an outlier?
Yeah. Well, all of our charts are very unique. So there's going to be different aspect patterns or a lack of an aspect between whatever it is in that zodiac sign. So, say we're talking about a sun sign and that sun is making crazy aspects all over the chart. Well, those aspects and those planets that it's connecting with are sending in energy. They're working together, whether it's a frictional or a fusion or a harmonious angle or a really tense angle. And that's going to inform how that energy shows up.
Right, I could
What
see
do you
that.
think, Amber?
So, because we are kind of like there's Saturn on your sun, then you have that Saturn archetype as well playing in. Like they're like these two archetypes are merging together. So yeah, I do think that there's definitely a lot more room for hybrid archetypes.
I like that term, hybrid archetype.
Right. I mean, because we're not just I feel like I hear this all the time, but we're not just our sun signs. And a lot of people, especially if they haven't seen their birth chart, are really thinking about, well, I'm not this. And like if you're a Cancer sun, but the rest of your planets are in Leo, then you aren't going to have a lot more of a Leo filter on your Cancer sun expression. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think a lot of times when I hear someone say, well, I'm an outlier, or this, I'm nothing like other people that are this sign, when you look at their chart, they typically have a lot of planets like in another sign. So it doesn't mean that they're not a Cancer, but that they're also pulling in this other energy and kind of like creating a merged archetype.
Mm-hmm. And the houses too, because like if you have your sun in the 12th house, it could be, this is the way I read it at least,
Yeah.
it's we're releasing our identity over and over and over again. So it's almost like you're releasing that archetype, you're rebirthing into a new version of it. Of course you're going to hit an outlier every, now and again with that rebirth process.
Yeah. Um, I also feel like thinking about, if we're not just thinking about the sun sign and we're thinking about the other planets and their signs, that the planetary archetypes do pull in with it. So if we have like Mars in Cancer, it's, you are the fighter that and the warrior that is associated with Mars, but then you also bring in that nurturing Cancer energy. And so we see potentially a mama bear. Like, yeah, you aren't a warrior like fighting on these front lines, but you are still being protective in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. It's funny because I have a friend who has a moon in Aries, and she's such like she's really into her motherhood, her job as a mother, but she's also like the first one to like stand up and like fight for her kids and just be like, oh, we gotta go, we gotta do this, like something's happening, da, da, da. And it seems like this like chaotic, scattered energy. And she's like, why do I always fly off the handle when something happens? And it's like, well, you're ready to go to war. You're ready to fight for your kids, of course. So
Right. No, I can see that.
yeah.
I think too, like this isn't really, do you have anything else to say around the chart? Like if there's multiple signs emphasized before, because I have another reason why outliers might exist.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I think too, it's our like view of archetypes and kind of confusing them as stereotypes and the difference, but we kind of oversimplify archetypes, where archetypes are talking about the motivations, or like it brings a picture, but that picture can be expressed differently. And stereotypes are more limiting. For example, I'm just thinking about when we hear the like one of the archetypes for Scorpio. One thing I want to add is just that every sign does have more than one archetype assigned to it, even if one might be more popular within pop astrology. But if Scorpio has the archetype of shaman, we each have our own image of what a shaman is or isn't in our minds. And it's like, I'm thinking about like, there's a lot of like heavy Scorpio energy in Kim Kardashian's chart. And people might think shaman, that's not her. But it's like, there's something really hypnotic about her to a lot of people. And so why can't she be a shaman? It's like, maybe we're asking, especially if we're someone who's quick to say, oh, that person doesn't fit this, or they're an outlier. It's like, what is that actually saying about what I think about what a warrior is or what a shaman is? You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. It's like the range of what Scorpio can mean. It's like there's a range of what shaman can mean, let alone what Scorpio can mean. We're already defining things into these little categories, and these little categories become ever more expansive.
Yeah.
I didn't know that about Kim Kardashian. That's very interesting. Huh. Yeah. But it's also, we could talk about like the other side of Scorpio, where it's like the detective or the hypnotist and the truth teller. And it's like bringing in those psychotherapy type of lenses or archetypes to things. And would you necessarily want to go to a psychotherapist that comes off as a shaman, or would you want them to be more about that detective, emotional detective? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you also live into multiple archetypes within a sign?
Oh, definitely. I definitely think so. And it's kind of like a range. Like there's like an entire window through life, and we can kind of ebb and flow within it. Like you might show up as more of a shaman at one particular point in your life, and later on become more of like a social detective. Maybe at one point, Scorpio can also be like the lower archetypes of things. Maybe that person is really mistrusting, or is an intrusive person, to go the other direction with it. That doesn't mean they're always going to be that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. Also the idea of, and I don't personally believe in cusps. We could have a whole discussion about that. But when someone's born on a cusp, especially the later degree.
Like a cusp sign. Like
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I know this is probably inflammatory. Here we go. Existential side quest.
If you disagree with Jenna, please share in the chat.
I'm totally okay with being wrong and with fighting you. No, just kidding.
We love a challenge.
We love a challenge. I love that. Yes, it'll get existential pretty quickly.
Right.
But if someone's like a 28 or 29 degree of some sign, and within a year or two in their life, that via progression, their evolving self is actually the sign after it. And then they spend the next 30 or so years embracing, incorporating, expressing that new sign's energy. It can be very easy for them to be like, well, I must be an outlier because I don't identify with any of that. But really, it's just your progressions have really honed in on this additional energy from the sign that your sun ingressed into via progression.
That's a good point too. It's like there's this evolution to archetypes, which not only like one from progressions, but I'm also thinking about like as we age in general, right? Like I think not everyone uses the negative archetypes, but it's like archetypes can be the high and the low. And so I think sometimes it's like if you don't identify with that high archetype, does that mean you aren't on your way to developing that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I know what you mean. Because honestly, it's like when people are like, oh, do you want to learn things the difficult way? Well, you're still learning, you're still moving through that sign. So if someone more identifies with the lower archetypes of a sign versus the higher archetypes of the sign, they're still having valid experiences and growing.
Right. I think too, it's like, what are the archetypes that we're using limiting in someone's ability to kind of stretch the archetype to fit things?
Yeah.
Because I think we hear Aries and warrior a lot. So if we're only ever hearing warrior and not different, I don't want to say mutations, but like different
frequencies
of warrior energy, like guardian or protector, or you can jump in, defender, or scaredy cat, like where you're protecting yourself from even getting, like, just I think even the helicopter mom might be the warrior as well. But I think just getting used to like the frequencies will change, but the archetype doesn't. But it's like if we keep just naming one, then it's really easy to like think it's limiting and just like, oh, I'm not this warrior now. Like especially when you're younger, it's like, well, yeah. I mean, have you gone out to like, have you taken a stand of some sort yet? But like, let's see, like when something comes up, like you can be that.
Yeah, I want to jam on this Aries for a second. So like, I also like to think of Aries as like the survivor, because even when this Aries energy, when Mars goes to war, it can be that warrior in that moment, but it can also come out of the war and be like, am I the hero? Am I a hero now because of what I did? Or did I kind of barely survive it? Did I have to take a lot of risks and I kind of learned how to be more of like a daredevil or like a risk taker within that? So it's like my experiences within that archetype inform how I'm going to continue to grow. So say you go to war and or whatever that war looks like. Say you go to battle by tackling 8th grade. Good for you. You did it. You got through that. What do you look like coming out the other end? Maybe your experience shapes you in such a way that you come out the other end looking more like an outlier for that Aries energy.
I can see that.
Yeah. So it's almost like your experience within the archetype and evolving and, moving through that, actualizing, might actually push you to be more of an outlier. And then, do I still identify as Aries now that I'm no longer the more what we think of as, warrior? Well, I'm not fighting with anyone anymore. I'm not standing up for myself. I'm not leading the way of my 8th grade pack. I'm moving into 9th grade as a completely different kid. I don't know why I'm sticking with this style. Sorry, little 8th grader. But moving into 9th grade, it doesn't necessarily mean I've gone from a high archetype to a low archetype, like taking that balancing piece of it out of it. I can still be just as high of an archetype, but I'm showing up in a different way now.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up survivor, because that is an Aries archetype. And I think that's why it's so important to have minimum 3 ideas of archetypes in your mind, especially if you're an astrologer talking with a client. But the more the merrier, like brainstorming what are different archetypes that resonate with you, so that you can, especially as you look at their chart, because I'm wondering too, if you feel like a survivor, but you were only presented hero or the rescuer. And I'm like, maybe if you're a Sun Jupiter conjunction in Aries, like that, feeling like the hero can feel more comfortable for you. But then there are other people who it's like they very much are like leaning into that here, but it's like these words are charged. And because that's the whole point of like archetypes should bring an image to our head. And I don't know like what comes to my head for hero and what comes to your head for hero are going to be different. Or like what comes to my head for survivor, I feel like strong, but someone else might be like a survivor and like I barely made it through it. You know what I mean? And so it's just like what kind of image is going to come to that person's head or like reaction in their body can also be like whether we want to be an outlier or like do we want to let that in, like do we want to claim that archetype as our own.
Yeah, I really like that.
Because I do want to ask, like, what did you have something to say?
No, go ahead.
Because I was thinking, I am an Aquarius, but I was thinking about which signs or like modes or anything like have this outlier, like either this reaction where they don't want to be an outlier or they do feel like they're an outlier the most. Because I was like, I don't know a lot of Aquariuses who do feel like an outlier, but the archetype of Aquarius in general, like there is space to be different and an individual. And so I think that makes sense to me why someone might be like other people might not think an Aquarius fits that archetype, but Aquarius is themselves, it's like, well, that makes sense, but it's because they're the individualist. And so even if I don't fit it, you kind of do. So I was wondering like which sign archetypes kind of set themselves up for people to feel like they don't fit more.
That's so interesting because my mind immediately goes to, well, the ones that we most easily stereotype, because then people will reject the stereotype so much that they can't see the wisdom of the archetype that actually can be kind of similar to the stereotype.
Do you have one?
Of course I do. Leo.
Yeah.
For everyone in the audience, Kimber and I have a lot of oppositions, and it's amazing. And it's a great opportunity for us to experience what that type of to grow. Yeah. And the mirroring that oppositions can bring up. Like, wow, it's so interesting to know you because I have no Aquarius placements, but you have a ton of Aquarius. I'm like, wow, this is really neat. But yeah, Leo is where my mind immediately goes because I feel, as a Leo sun, of course, I feel that Leo is one of those signs that people like to rag on and say like, oh, that they need to be the star, the center of attention. They're so dramatic, they're bratty and all that. But really, we can talk about the archetypes behind that stereotype and the performative nature of Leo, the fact that Leo does want that audience.
I was going to say Leo or Scorpio for sure. Because I think, I know a lot of people are like, well, I think Scorpios penetrate and they're truth tellers, detectives, and not everyone wants someone digging into their stuff.
Yeah.
And covering certain things. And so there is like, I think in society, some like anti-Scorpio energy of just, and so it's like, well, I don't want to say I'm like that. And I can totally see that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I went to this weekend retreat once and I was the only, and it was just casual fun. It was not astrology based. And there were two people there. They were a couple and they actually got engaged that week and it was adorable. And they were both Leo suns. And when I mentioned that I was an astrologer and they were like, oh, I don't believe in astrology. I was like, oh, okay. I'm interested though. Why? And they said, well, we're both Leo suns, but we're super quiet. There's their outlier. They were so, they didn't like to perform. They didn't like to go out and be clownish or present themselves as an aristocrat or some sort of like king or queen. We talk a lot about the royalty, the regal lion of Leo. They totally didn't connect with that at all. But I could tell just through that weekend that their friends all really valued them at the center of the social circle.
Right. Yeah. So they were still Leo. That makes me, I wonder where it was in their chart, because I think too, if you have like a fourth house sun or like a fourth house stellium with all this energy, maybe this energy, this archetype feels stronger in fourth house relationships where people who don't know you personally might not feel like that fits you at all. I do find people the archetype of the rising can really feel more like this is that person. And that's again why we're kind of going back to, you can't just think about a sun sign or one planet because we are complex humans that take up all these other expressions.
We're getting some great comments in the chat, which is wonderful. I'm going to start with the first one. Lisa is talking about this big Capricorn conjunction that we have in the sky right now and how it's hitting. She has her South Node, Mercury retrograde, and Mars in Capricorn. Oh, wow. All within 11 degrees of each other, ranging from 10 to 21. So she's really getting slammed with some beautiful frequencies right now.
Well, yeah, which can also bring out that energy more, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Considering what else is going on in the chart, what type of work through life Lisa's done, what kind of evolving she's done. And it might feel right now where it's like Mars is there, Venus is there, the sun is there. That's a lot of personal planets. That's a lot going on, a lot of quick moving energy, these transits that are going to be triggering things. So leaning into like, am I feeling more empowered to, Capricorn ruled by Saturn, to be more disciplined about things? Or am I actually feeling more like I'm being hunted by this energy and it's kind of all crashing down on top of me? That's an interesting thing to think about. If the transit embodies the archetype, is there more room for you to be the outlier of it? Like if you're under this heavy Capricorn transit and you're like, well, my boss at work is yelling at me, and all my plans got canceled, it's forcing me to be a hermit. And like if the astrological weather is so much embodying the archetype, is it okay? Is it more promoting you like not really identifying with more of the archetypes?
If you've already felt like an outlier beforehand, is what you're saying?
Either
way. Well, I think that kind of goes to, you can live into different expressions of the archetype because they all share the same agenda or like motivations and core values. So it's like the hermit and the elder still have something in common, even if the elder is like out and like the hermit is like withdrawn. They're both wise and they're both responsible. And so I wonder, I could definitely see how the transits could like impact the way you express that archetype. But I wonder if it would be like, maybe you might become less of an outlier in that moment.
Oh, like all your little Capricorn friends are here via the planets to promote you coming into harmony with some of those archetypes. Yeah, I really like that. That's a cool.
Yeah, it could go either way. That's like a really interesting thought to kind of. Yeah, we could definitely jump in that rabbit hole.
For sure. Andy said, hey, Andy, yes, words are codes to send thought pictures to each other. I love that. No two people get the exact same picture from the same word. That's so true. That's so true. It's tripping on Capricorn a little bit harder. There's the schemer archetype of it, like the always planning, always scheming the next thing. Yeah. Some people might think of that as like a negative thing. Like, oh, that's a schemer.
And you can definitely, I think, like if I'm in the astrology room with like a client and you throw out an archetype, you can tell when someone's reaction, especially if you were sharing it as like the higher archetype, if they're like, that's not me, or like very defensive, that's a clue that, okay, maybe the picture that came to my mind is not aligned with theirs. And then there's an opportunity. It doesn't mean like, oh no, I got it wrong. It's like, that's an opportunity to get curious about, well, what comes to your mind when I say that? Like they're like, I think if someone has strong teacher energy, and then, so I'm thinking Gemini or even Sagittarius, but they're like, oh, I don't teach anything. I'm not a teacher. And I'm like, that's not necessarily like, okay, never mind. And like, move on. There's like an opportunity to kind of dig deeper and be like, oh, what do you mean? You're not a teacher.
Like, do you ever kind of show people how to do things?
Right.
Have you ever? Yeah.
Like maybe you're not a formal teacher, and like kind of digging through like when I'm thinking about a teacher or a messenger, like this is what's coming to my mind, or like asking more like what is the image that's coming into their mind.
We have another Aquarius that identifies as an outlier. Jill's here saying, I'm an outlier. She's just joking.
What did she say? She's just joking.
She said, I'm an outlier, JK, LOL, Aquarius through and through. The Pisces and Cancers I know don't enjoy being told they're emotional. Oh, that's true.
That actually brings up a good point with masculine, feminine expressions, and also the patriarchy came to mind when I was thinking about this topic. Because if you go on pop astrology or TikTok, so often, I think when astrology comes up, someone will say, oh, I don't like Pisces men are awful, Virgo men are awful. Can't, but then they say that about every single sign. So I'm like, are you saying like I think this has more to do with how you're feeling about this masculine expression, but it's like I don't think all men are awful, not trying to like marginalize or push anyone out of the chat. But what I'm thinking is makes me think when I think about Cancer and Pisces, very watery. And then within our society, when we're raising boys and girls, there's sometimes this way, like we treat them differently sometimes. And it's like if you are an emotional sign, but there weren't opportunities or you're not being encouraged to be emotional, or your emotions are even worse, like being like repressions being encouraged.
Mm-hmm.
How do you develop like healthy strategies to manage that sensitivity? So you're a lot more likely to be defensive if someone's because of like what does being emotional mean in our society. And so I do feel like the culture you're raised in or live in can encourage or like discourage healthy and unhealthy expressions of an archetype, or feeling like, oh, I don't fit into that archetype.
Do you think it could therefore also influence you becoming more of an outlier?
Yes. No, yes, I do. I'm trying to let this thought cook. Can you say more?
Well, I was just thinking about like so my high school sweetheart was a Cancer sun, and now knowing, and I didn't know astrology back then, but now knowing astrology, I can reflect back and be like, wow, I wouldn't have called him emotional at all, even though that's what we think of when we think water signs or Cancer, especially because it has to do with feeling your feelings. But he definitely was sensitive to my feelings and had like this emotional IQ that was kind of a little bit off the charts, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. So it's like he was an outlier in that you wouldn't have walked up to him and guessed that he was a Cancer sun because he did sports and he was really into tech and all this stuff. But that Cancer energy was still there.
Yeah, I think too, something we leave out with like the water signs or emotional is the intuitive, like where you can sense things. Cause I see that a lot, like a lot of Pisces, like Simone Biles is a Pisces, and I think Shaun White, like just different like flow athletes, but it's like there is still intuition within the physical body. Yeah, I could definitely see I mean, it has to. Your climate and culture does have to play into how the archetypes express. So obviously that could be a part of what's contributing to someone feeling like an outlier or actually showing up that way.
I really like that. We have another comment from Lisa, who, if you remember from the beginning, she has a lot of Capricorn placements, and she's sharing that it's along with a Venus-Pluto contra parallel. That is a big term for astrology. Yeah. Do you want me to explain it?
The contra parallel is similar to an opposition, but I'm curious if this opposition, I mean, it's Venus Pluto, so I don't think Pluto's in Cancer unless he's very, very old. But where I'm interested what sign it's in. So there's still, whenever there's a contra parallel, there's still this like opposition, like polarity tension between the two.
And if it was a Venus, just for the audience, if it was a Venus-Pluto parallel, what we'd be saying is it's kind of more like a fusion, more like a conjunction. But instead of talking about the actual signs, like Venus and Pluto being together in a sign, we're talking about them being together at the declination, the degree at which they are above or below the celestial equator. So in Lisa's case, Venus is so far north or south, and Pluto is exactly that same amount in the opposite side.
Right.
So, and she said she just had her 60-second solar return. So Pluto's definitely not in Cancer.
Yeah.
Probably Virgo. That's quick math right there. She said it was productive, and it was productive in 1994, and I'm hoping that I can do that again. So that first Saturn or 1994. Tell us what you mean by that, Lisa. What happened in 1994? And she's hoping she can do that again, especially since she's not really felt that way for about 20 years. Thanks for all your comments, Lisa. I have Aquarius, so I'm an outlier, but Capricorn makes me know why specifically I'm not just being rebellious for no reason. That's a good point, because Capricorn needs to know it's about climbing that mountain, doing that diligent work, but you have to climb the right mountain. You have to be rebellious for the right reason.
Right.
Yeah. That's a good blending of energy. One of the archetypes that, Kimber, you were there when this was presented a couple of months ago, of the archetype of Aquarius being, quote, socially chilly.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting term for it. And I feel like it's gentler than some of the lower archetypes can be really slamming, whereas socially chilly is just like just enough of that kind of tense expression coming through there.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't in response to socially chilly, but something else. I think, like, do the archetypes need to update or not? I think sometimes people aren't connecting with them as well because they've been the same for however long, and culture changes. But specifically the movie Mean Girls, I can't believe I'm bringing this up into an astrology conversation, but Lindsay Lohan's character Katie is very Aquarian at the beginning. She doesn't fit in. And is she less of an Aquarius? I don't know if she was actually an Aquarius in the movie, just stay with me, but she tries to fit in. She kind of gives up her personality, is very conventional in this hierarchy within school. Is she less Aquarian? Because isn't that also part of the Aquarius shadow of just where you're like, you do fit in, you do have those you look conventional, but on the inside, you're kind of like you're hiding that part of you that doesn't fit.
I actually love that you brought up Katie in Mean Girls, because not only is she kind of like that quirky misfit at the beginine, she's super smart. And when so she's Aquarius through and through, because we have that genius side of it, along with being a little bit, exile-y, revolutionary.
And she self-abandons when she's trying to impress the guy who I can't remember his name, of just like, I'm not smart. I need help. Like
completely changes her style as well as her mental style.
Right. Like, and you're still, but I don't know. I think there's definitely sometimes, especially if we're not claiming the motivation, like Aquariuses want individuality. We still have the power to kind of reject it or give it up. And I don't know if you're an outlier then. I think you're falling more into a shadow expression where, and that, I think that comes up still with like there being comfort or discomfort with the sign itself.
Comfort or discomfort. I like that. Yeah, when we're really uncomfortable, or does that promote us kind of like moving through the archetypes and being like, ooh, I don't really like feeling this way. How can I express this differently?
Yeah.
And if all of the range of general archetypes none of them feel right, does that kind of subconsciously promote an outlier expression?
Yes.
Yeah.
That I think too, even if you have met, I think when Jill was talking about Cancers and Pisces that she's met, imagine then you get into a reading and you find out that you have certain placements in Cancer and Pisces, but you have this experience with Cancer, Pisces, and you don't see yourself in that. So how would that feel? It's like there's already this kind of I don't think so, I'm gonna reject that.
Yeah. And it's so like
really being curious why, like, what is it about this sign that I'm either don't claim in myself or I do see, but it's saying something I don't want to hear.
Yeah. There's a lot going around, at least in some social circles, about new age circles, about how when people don't like you or they're mean to you, like that actually has nothing to do with you. It's all how much projection we have. Granted, we've already talked a lot about projection, how much projection we have when we're just out there thinking it's somebody else's the problem, but really it's something within us that either we're uncomfortable with or we're denying, or, what activates somebody. It's really something within ourselves to be worked on. So connecting with that Cancer energy. Lisa also said, humans love labeling things so they can avoid things that hurt, but that's extreme, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I really like that. I like labeling, and this is going to take a second, but words of judgment, like when we say things are good or bad. And sometimes we're like, well, that's kind of lazy. That's a shortcut. Like you're just judging something rather than truly describing it. sometimes it's good. Sometimes we need that. Like, it's effective. Like, if I went to buy some food from the grocery store and I was like, oh, can I get that batch of tomatoes right there? And the grocer's like, no, they're bad. I'd be like, well, thank you for telling me that. I'm going to move on. But if he's like, oh, these tomatoes, they came here a week ago and they're starting to spoil. There's these rotten spots on them. I'd be like, thanks. I'm actually okay with this like really specific description. I'd rather have a judgment word. So sometimes it can be helpful, but oftentimes these stereotypes, these judgment words, when we're talking about the archetypes of astrology, it's basically just sloppy and laziness moving us to a direction that isn't actually embracing the truth of how we could be describing what we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. I could see that. What's going on in the chat?
There's a lot going on in the chat. I'm trying to keep up. All right, Dave. Hello, Dave. Where do Taurus men fall on the spectrum of emotions? That's a great question. It's a wonderful question. Do we want to start first with Taurus, the archetypes of Taurus?
I like can we read what Lisa took a stab at that question?
Oh, okay. You're reading further than me.
Mm-hmm.
That depends, Dave. But in my experience, there is an idea of mine, if that makes sense, and whatever that means to you. Not necessarily a bad thing. Some people like that, but other people don't. Mm-hmm. Taurus. I want to go back to let me see if I can like show the question. Oh, it worked.
So, I'm trying to tie this into Outliers. I think Taurus, well, I'm a Taurus moon, so that Taurus and emotions in general, I think, I don't even know how to go about answering that question.
Well, I'll try. My husband is a Taurus sun.
Outliers, but I guess I'll just answer the question. We just go off topic. Come on, Jenna.
Well, my husband's a Taurus sun, and I feel like he is a great representation of that Taurus male energy, because remember that Taurus is ruled by Venus, and Venus has this really sensual energy to it. However, and Taurus does too. However, Taurus, remember Venus rules Libra as well. The Taurus side of Libra is very pragmatic. It's very down to earth. So as much as Taurus, just like all the signs, everyone experiences emotion. Taurus, I feel, generally at a high expression understands what to do with those emotions, and also there's a level of intuition with Taurus, this like inner knowing, like a primal connectedness that Taurus has, being that initial earth sign, the base of earth in the zodiac, that it has this knowing and this comfort, this stability, that even when there is kind of these emotional waves, that perhaps the stability of Taurus makes it so that they're not like with emotions. Remember, earth is the opposite of water. So where we're talking about how water signs can be almost like flooded with emotion, like water words with emotion, that Taurus can kind of earth absorb a lot of that emotion without falling to pieces. Maybe it'll turn to mud, but it'll dry up and be okay.
Yeah, I could see that. I can see too, like just that material aspect of Taurus, of just like how to manage emotions. And then when you were talking about stability, I'm thinking about like there can be constant in whatever your approach to emotional expression is. And so that might show up as an outlier or not. Like if like that, you described a very like high archetype expression. And so I can also see, if we're talking about what Lisa talking about, like the mind or that material security, your emotions might be that material that it's like I might not want to share, and like I might hold back, but that kind of still speaks to like the silent one archetype.
Definitely. I want to take a stab at the low archetypes. Thanks for that implied challenge there, because some of the lower archetypes that we see with Taurus can be that stubbornness, the rigid, I'm going to shove my heels into the dirt. I'm not going to move on this. I'm going to be stationary about it. And with that can come almost like a stuckness that promotes inactivity, and then we get into like laziness. So maybe sometimes emotions can either be kind of pushed aside for the sake of keeping that stuckness, prioritizing, no, this is how I feel about it. Or if the emotions validate the stuckness, it's like, see, this is all I needed to know. I'm right to stay right here.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
No offense to any Tauruses. I have 0 planets in Taurus, so please, I welcome correction. Awesome. I'm looking at some more of the comments, seeing what I missed. All right. Oh, okay. Thank you, Lisa. It was her Saturn return in 1993. Yeah, a lot of responsibilities. It sounds like single mom, no support, legal secretary. That's a really good expression of that. So it's like, even if you weren't feeling into your own Capricorn nature, it was all around you. That frequency was vibing from the outside in. So you definitely could have felt into that, even if you were like, I'm not really embodying this elder archetype right now.
Right.
I really like that. Oh, Dave said, I have more to learn, thanks. And he's never stubborn. I'm not. Dave made a cringy,
a very stubborn comment.
Yes, I love that. My husband is also never stubborn, so that can be the outlier. All right, Jill, have either of you noticed a pattern in people that consider themselves outliers that are potentially an entire sub-archetype? Ooh. Or would that pattern just be seen in commonalities with other planets and signs? I'm going to put that question up on the screen because it's the big one. Have either of you noticed a pattern in people that consider themselves outliers that are potentially an entire sub-archetype?
So I want to, maybe Jill can like expand, but are you saying that because like maybe within a sign, so many people view themselves as an outlier that it then becomes a new addition or mutation to the sign?
We'll see what she says. But I think I do think
we can start talking about it though, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of examples in my life where I've had multiple people think that they're outliers from the same sign. One of them that I tend to say is Libra people. I think Libra people, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is once again a sign in your big 3, not mine, sometimes resist the relational side of the sign.
Okay.
Like, oh, well, I'm not in a relationship, so no, Libra, no, that's not really my thing. Or, oh, well, you know, I can live without a partner. I'm very independent.
Because I think that's too, which I think Libra's hard because there's the artist and the lover, because the real thing at the heart of Libra is beauty and peace. And so sometimes that's in harmony. So that could be relationships, or it's also like this aesthetic situation. And so, which an artist is already part of that archetype. So I'm trying to think of one that would turn into an outlier.
Or I've had Libran people say to me like, oh, well, I'm super picky with who I date. Like, I'm not just going to go for anyone. I'm not a flirt like that. I'm not a Libra like that. Like, I still have my standards.
I think that too. I feel like that might come around like the element, because I think even when Jill was talking about the Cancer Pisces who are kind of saying they're not emotional, then they're kind of rejecting like the water sign, the water element situation. And with air, I feel like if you're saying I'm not, like, I think like the Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, sometimes Libras think like we think relationship, and so we're like that they need to have relationships or build them quickly, that they don't have discernment because they're airy. And so I can see it's almost like you're rejecting like that pace, or that you're just like in your head about everything and not still connected to like your gut or like being able to be intuitive. But I see that with Leo too. It's like you're rejecting that because I think there's this shame around putting yourself out there or like living out loud in our society, that it's like, what am I actually rejecting Leo, or am I rejecting like the fire?
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Because I think like that one's I definitely can see how, I don't know if it could create a sub archetype, but there are like, if there's one archetype that you reject, then you can kind of see that as the only archetype that represents that sign, and the importance of having multiple archetypes for each sign.
It's interesting too to think about like how well, we talk about how each of the zodiac signs builds on each other and overcorrects for the ones next to each other. So sticking with Libra, like if Virgo's really analytical nature, really, willing to work on the nitty gritty pieces, whereas Libra is like kind of like, okay, let's calm down, let's all like, let's be harmonious about this, like we don't need to always be working on that, we can find the peace, we can rebalance with a little bit of serenity. And then maybe if we're too serene, we're going back into Virgo. I wonder if people who reject some of the archetypes of their sign are really kind of doing that overcorrection, or they're correcting for any overabundance within the frequency of their sign. So yeah, I'm Libran, but I'm super picky about who I date. It's almost like, well, there's going to be some other Libran energy in your life. Like you're saying, they could be an artist, but then to correct for that abundance of Libra present in the fact that they're so artistic, they get to be a little bit more Virgoan in relationship.
Yeah, I could see that. And it's like, there's also that tolerating paradox or wanting to be more than one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that. What
Yeah.
about, you're kind of making me think about, like, let's say you have a stellium in a sign. So you have that archetype, and you know how in Jeff Wolf Green's version of evolutionary astrology, we talk a lot about like the Pluto polarity point. Mm-hmm. So could it be that we then express the opposite of this emphasized sign in our chart?
Ooh, I like
and that. Now is the opposite if you're still showing up as that. And I think I was just looking at the series webinar that Kepler had, where they were talking about series and how sometimes your attachment style or the way you nurture others is actually the opposite of your series sign. So it's still connected. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, is that an outlier?
I'm tempted to say yes, it's an outlier. And it's one that you need to be very careful with, because you don't want to lose the initial goals and wisdom of that root sign when you go to that polarity point, that opposite point. So like, let's do Aquarius and Leo, for example. If Aquarius, the opposite Leo, if Aquarius leans too much into what other people think, leaning into the audience, leaning into caring too much about blending in or having approval, or I need to be vulnerable to these certain people and actually care what they think. It could actually muddy the waters of the goals of the development of that Aquarius in their chart, what it's trying to promote and push them through. That go out there and be unique, individuate. You're ushering in this futuristic, almost revolutionary, ingenious energy. And if you're too wrapped up in that opposition, that parallel point, you're going to miss the opportunities to actually achieve your evolutionary goals. Uh-oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry, I accidentally turned myself off. Okay. It makes me think of when Jill was bringing up the Cancer Pisces, who are kind of like, I'm not emotional, I'm just Cancer. And then you're kind of bringing in this, you're really overcorrecting with that Capricorn of like, no, I'm good. And maybe you handle your emotions very self-sufficiently or in-house, and that's like, it's a private matter. And I like the idea of that is an outlier. So I think with Jill's question around a sub archetype, it's like there could be a chance, like a big chance for that overcorrection being a response, so we can see it as an outlier. But I like tying it in how then you're kind of taking away the experience to really engage with what your sign's here to like work through or like learn, and the strengths. I think definitely I would like to push anyone who feels like an outlier, one, seeing like what planets are tied in that add to that filter, but also what is it that sign archetype is really all about, like looking at multiple ways of describing it, and what are you really here to learn, and you can come up with your own.
For sure. Lisa also commented, if Jill means like the extremes of political alignment, both sides see themselves as outliers when it's those that are in the middle that are actually the outliers. That's such a good point, because we talk about like the centrists, and then we go out here and then we have liberals and conservatives, and then as they kind of go out further, they actually wrap back around, and our extremists are actually closer together. Yeah.
I could see that. That's really good.
Yeah. Not necessarily a healthy way to integrate.
No, but good example of archetypes.
Yes, yes, very true. And then Jill said, but the outliers would see themselves as outliers for the same reason, which is why it would be a sub archetype.
I think too, it's like archetypes are meant to describe, not prescribe. And I feel like we're going to have a lot more outliers or people who feel like outliers when they are used to be prescriptive instead of descriptive.
So Lisa's saying, I'm wondering what an example sub-archetype label is to make sure I understand.
I mean, I think a good one, like, I feel like we've talked about Aries a lot, but I'm sorry, but would this be a sub, like, I mean, it's kind of like the shadow side, but it's also sub-archetype, because you wouldn't feel like Aries would be the scaredy cat, where you're not a warrior. You've kind of inverted that bravery and courage into fear.
Yeah. And we talk about the lower expressions when you're not feeling like being a warrior, like, oh, well, maybe you're bullied. But what if that's not your experience either? Right. And I like what you're saying, because it's almost like, well, you've become your own bully. Like you're letting yourself live in fear.
I'd love if anyone in the chat can think of ones that are not negative, but that really resonates for me. I'm thinking about Aquarius, and something I use that for a lot of people is because of that emotional detachment. Sometimes you're the cool girl that people don't actually know you, and you seem too cool. Like you're not really ruffled by anything because you are. So it's like cool girl and Aquarius. That feels like, I feel like I know a lot of people that kind of fit into that, and that could be a sub archetype outlier. Because like if you don't, you're like, I'm not a revolutionary, I'm not a rebel. Like the cool girl fits in. She's Regina George, like not Katie.
Yeah. I love that. The cool girl, it feels very much like Libra and also Aquarius. And then when we bring the other air in, Gemini, to bring it all together, it's like when people are like, oh, well, that Gemini person, Geminis are two-faced. And it's like, well, no, they're trying to just blend in that situation, be the cool person. So Lisa said, I forget who said this, but Libra is an Aries with a velvet glove. They still hit.
And that ties in the whole opposition connection. But yeah, I'm wondering too, like Gemini and like what if you're a Gemini, like listening is part of communication, but what if you're the Gemini whose voice looks different than just like verbal, or the way that like we have these certain buckets we put communication in.
Yeah. Like when people are like, oh, you're so Gemini, you must either talk for a living or do something with words. Are you a writer? And then they're like, well, no, I'm actually a photographer. Right. Or remember, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So.
Right. And that's the thing. It's like Gemini's about information processing, not necessarily writing. I think it's really like, what are we leaning with? And it's like this, if I hear, well, I don't write or I don't do this, so this is in me. I'm so intrigued. Are there any more comments?
Yep. Lisa saying, Aquarius can absolutely care what people think and usually want to be a pest or antagonist more than be ignored.
Yes.
Yeah. That's so true. I have quite a few friends who are born on an Aquarius new moon. So they are Aquarius sun and moon. And to watch the kind of tension that they carry in themselves, where they're like, I really want to be part of a group and have friends. I'm a human. Of course, we're social beings. But then I really desperately, for both my head and my heart, for both my sanity and my happiness, I need to individuate. So yeah, being the antagonist, certainly in the social circles where that's allowed, not necessarily appreciated, because Aquarius doesn't necessarily need to feel appreciated all the time. But yeah, when you're allowed to express it in that way.
I'm wondering too, I'm thinking about mutable signs, because I feel like there's more fluidity. And I wonder how many people who are in the mutable signs feel like they are an outlier, or is there more freedom to not necessarily fit into an archetype?
That's so interesting because it's like fixed signs. It's like, well, I fit or I don't fit, and that's that. And like kind of being a little stubborn, that fixed energy that's like just going to sit in it. And then cardinal signs where it's like the excitement to just dive in and get going. It's like whichever comes up, whether I'm an outlier or I fit into an archetype, like it's an exploration, but mutable. Yeah.
Hmm.
The changeability of it. Hmm. That is super interesting.
I know. Okay, I feel like we could talk about outliers all day, and I've been loving this conversation, but I know we have 5 minutes. So I think we've kind of established that outliers do not break archetypes,
Mhm.
but archetypes still have a space to be used. So, how do we use archetypes where they still speak to people who do feel like they are an outlier, or they just don't fit into that popular representation? It reminds me of this term. I think it's outdated about we bubble. Like when you're a teacher, there's like students that are in this bubble that it's like the bell curve, and it's like the people on either end. It's like, what about these edge students? Like how like do we let the archetypes serve everybody? Like do you lead with archetypes? Is that harmful
Mm-hmm.
in the astrology reading room?
That's such a good point. And it makes me think too, when you were giving the classroom example, it's like there was all that theory, at least 20 years ago, there was when I was in school for teaching, about like, do we want integrated classrooms or do we want to separate? Do we want to separate these outliers? Are we going to put all the gifted kids together and all these kids together and all the middle of the road kids together?
Or we mix it up? Yeah.
Yeah. And is there wisdom to mixing it all up? Is there wisdom? But then would those outliers, now back to astrology, would they feel even more highlighted in that type of a mixed situation, highlighted for not fitting in, and therefore feel even less attached,
Yeah.
less secure, less tethered, I
Yes.
guess. Yeah.
So would you how do you use archetypes during your counseling room sessions?
Well, I really like to look at the archetypes of the rising sign and prepare the reading and prepare how I'm going to interact with my client based on their rising sign, because as we know, the rising sign is the lens with which the inner world meets the outer world. It's how these people are absorbing their outward experience as well as how they're showing up for that outward experience. So if I'm able to mirror that, at least in a non-outlier, middle of the bell curve kind of way. So for instance, if I have a Taurus client, I'm going to show up and have a steady pace and a steady message to them, be very pragmatic about my delivery. I'm going to use language, and I'm going to verbalize things in a way that keeps the communication steady and clear. I'm going to try to avoid a ton of side quests, in other words.
Yeah. No, I like this. So it's less about sharing it and more like how you would approach this person.
Mm-hmm. 100%. And I feel like through the reading, you start to feel into like, oh, like they don't really necessarily need me to do X, Y, Z. They're actually vibing with it more when I go a little bit this way.
Right. And that makes me think about how we were kind of trained with this primal triad,
Mm-hmm.
and whether you share that with the client or not. And for those who don't know, it's like really thinking about the archetypes when you're getting a feel for a chart of like with their big three, their sun, moon, and rising. And it makes me think like if I do share that during a reading, I really come up with my own archetypes based off of those hybrid chart patterns we talked about,
Mm-hmm.
where if I'm seeing Sagittarius in the 10th house and the sun, the type of archetype that I'm thinking about is going to be more like public, and like thinking about what's conjunct the sun. I'm going to kind of pull that flavor in
Mm-hmm.
to the archetype that I would share. So it might be like an adjective and then a noun. It might not just be one word.
Mm.
And is
Yeah.
that still an archetype? But I think like you'll get people who really relate to it more when
Mm-hmm.
you're pulling in, okay, so we see a lot of Gemini, which could be a teacher or storyteller or student, but then what else do I see? Or is there any other house emphasized? Is there another stellium in another sign? Are there any strong aspects showing up?
Mm.
And like that should include, that should kind of, and do you see any tension between if they have the teacher archetype, but then they have, I don't even want to say warrior because that's not really a opposite, but student doesn't feel like an opposite either. But it's just like, if you have a fighter and a lover, what does that tension tell us? And I think naming that you're not just this one archetype really helps someone stay invested during a session.
I love that. We're at the top of the hour now. That flew by. Every week it's faster and faster. We have a couple more comments from Lisa about wondering if mutables even care about being one or the other. That's a great thought.
I love that, Lisa.
That's really good. And she agrees with you, Kimber. Archetypes still work because the expressions tend to still have the same or literally opposite themes.
Right.
So, well, thank you, everyone. This was a really productive episode.
Yes,
very chatty.
Thank you.
Do you want to introduce next week's topic?
Oh, I'm very excited about this topic. We're talking about what if your career is not your purpose? So where else can purpose come from if it's not something you're getting a paycheck for?
I love that.
I have strong feelings about the 10th house and career. So very excited for that topic.
I'm really looking forward to this. Thank you so much, Lisa, everyone else in the chat.
Thank you.
We appreciate you guys being here and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.